it was about, God, it was about 12 weeks. It wasn't even that. It was like 8 weeks before 2019's Pride. And I had asked about setting up the gender diverse, or setting up the what was then kind of called the trans zone, because that had been in previous years kind of a bit tucked out of the way on the first floor of the Phoenix, and I felt it could do with just being invested in a bit more. So I approached Pride, and they brought me on board, and they asked me what I needed and what I wanted, and so I had about 8 weeks to put together a space for the day, and they gave me like the secret garden outdoors. And I thought I looked at the format of the panel discussion, and I think I have that place, but think I prefer something more communal. So I thought some group discussions would be good, get people talking to each other. But we basically, it was me and a bunch of friends taking naked photos of each other. I thought I'd kind of in a way either depending on how you look at it, either flip it on its head or really lean into it and be like, you wanna obsess over our bodies? Here's our bodies, but here's our bodies on our own terms. So yeah, it was kind of sort of attempt at sort of body positivity from a trans angle, and it went down. It went down fairly well the whole day. And as I said, I changed the name of it to the diversity zone. Gender diversity zone because the unraveling of the woolen jumper of gender um, results in more and more frayed ends. It's not as simple as you are cis or you are trans. There's gender diversity even within cis people. So yeah, I just kind of wanted to address that entire spectrum, as it were.
So, how did it feel going from like your first Pride, where you said that you didn't even feel kind of really confident to join in with the march, to actually being someone who was organizing the gender diversity zone and helping out?
I think it came about from my sort of education and increased awareness of more general, I want to say trans issues more than general like LGBT plus issues. As I got more aware of the specific issues that trans people specifically face, and how that paralleled other groups that have been marginalized over time, but sort of slowly become more acceptable, like gay men and women. You start to then look at the community around you, and I had trans friends, but a lot of them just didn't seem to be. There seemed to be a disconnect between the kind of the local LGBT scene, which was primarily an L and kind of LGB scene in a way, and yeah, and a lot of like gender diverse folks. And so I think, yeah, there seemed to be a gap. There needed to be, I think, a closer integration of that part of the community. But it, I think there's a larger conversation to be had about the ways that the kind of LGBT community, or at least the events that are put on and the kind of public facing kind of queer community, how it reflects people just more generally on a more intersectional basis, whether it's accessibility, whether it's with regards to sort of race dynamics, or whether it's about the way that gender is played with, because there are very established set ways that gender is played with, primarily being drag queens, which is fine in and of itself, but it is it does seem to have been the very very much the dominant kind of flavor of certainly Pride's, at least for, well, really most of its history. I think this is the biggest divide between, if you like, the LGB and the T plus parts of the community now, is that the dynamic of having to protest, by and large, the progress being made now for in regards to like sexual orientation is a soft push. Same-sex marriage has been law for over a decade now. It's quite easy to forget the achievements or the barriers that had to be overcome by the generations before us. So whether it was equalizing the age of consent, whether it was let's say same-sex marriage, allowing same-sex couples to adopt, everything like that. But there's been more or less equal footing now for over a decade. The need for political activism is much more pressing for trans people. We're fighting on a policy level, and we have barriers that didn't exist for other groups. We have medical considerations to bear in mind, and that is something that we cannot, sadly, just simply self-esteem our way through. So yeah, that's the main schism, I think, is that cis queer people probably don't feel that as pressing a need to engage politically as we as trans and gender diverse people now do.